Greetings, and welcome to Train Signal. You're watching Exchange 2013 Organization Features. Within the Exchange Admin Center is a feature called Organization, and inside that feature there are three very different tab items: Sharing, Apps, and Address Lists. And in this lesson, we're going to discuss these three different items. Okay, so let's get started. If you have ever worked with earlier versions of Exchange, then you know that Exchange has always had limited sharing capabilities, and there was this complex setup for connecting to other organizations and sharing information. So at times we would use the inter-organization replication tool. Sometimes we would use tools like the GalSync tool for synchronizing one's organization recipients to another organization. At times we created trusts between two different organizations, VPNs between organizations or individuals. So there was all of this extra work that was always necessary in order to establish any amount of sharing between two different organizations. Well, starting with Exchange 2007 and then enhanced with 2010, there were features that were added like Federation to assist when it comes to establishing better collaboration between two different organizations. Now, the Sharing tab, this is used to help configure inter-organizational sharing through the use of Federation, organizational relationships, and sharing policies. So as far as Federation is basically a process where you connect your organization to the Microsoft Federation Gateway. And other organizations do the same, or at least they do if they want to communicate and collaborate with you using organization relationships or sharing policies. And so you establish this relationship with the Federation Gateway, and then you can establish organization relationships or sharing policies with those organizations. The Microsoft Federation Gateway is a free cloud-based service that acts as the trust broker between the two federated organizations. So once you have a federated Exchange organization, you can establish organization relationships which allow you to share calendar FreeBusy information between users in the two organizations. And this doesn't just work with Exchange 2013, but it works with Exchange 2013 and Exchange 2010 Service Pack 2 organizations. Now, organization relationships are done on an organization level, not on an individual level. That's where sharing policies might be considered a bit more robust and flexible as far as the solution. So users can share their information with external recipients from other federated Exchange organizations. And this is different from the organization relationship, because with the organization relationship, it's a one-to-one relationship between the two Exchange organizations. It's not a relationship between individual users. But with sharing policies, that's different. With sharing policies, you can share user to user, as long as both organizations are federated. And the sharing policies allow users to share more than FreeBusy calendar information, but it also allows them to share contact information. Let's jump over to the server and let's just take a look at the tab here that is responsible for the configuration of these organization relationships and sharing policies. We're not really going to deep dive into this. We're not going to establish the federation, nor are we going to share or establish organization relationships with any other organization. In the case of SpyTech Prime, our scenario, that's not something that we necessarily need or are interested in. And in many organizations, as an Exchange administrator, you will never ever work with this feature. This is a feature that is really very specific to the needs of the organization. And so if you have the need, then you will know when you need to establish this. But let's just take a look at the Sharing tab under Organization Features. Alright, so we're on our Exchange server. We go to the Exchange Admin Center, and if we look at the Organization feature, you can see the first tab is called Sharing, and it starts by saying Federation Trust. A Federation Trust isn't enabled. Create a Federation Trust to enable users in your organization to share calendar FreeBusy information with Exchange Online and other federated Exchange organizations. So at this point, we're not going to enable this. We don't have the need through our scenario with SpyTech Prime to actually enable Federation trusts. We're not going to establish organization relationships at this point or sharing policies and so forth. But it's good for you to know that this feature does exist, it's here, and it does simplify the collaboration between organizations as opposed to what we had in the past with Exchange. Alright, let's jump back over to our slides and let's take a look at this next tab, the Apps tab, and we'll talk about what this organization feature can do for us. The Apps tab shows you how you can utilize apps to let your users do and see more without leaving their mailbox. And so the way this works is you can download and deploy apps to all persons within your organization. So let's jump over to our Exchange server and let's take a look at these 4 apps and the way this is set up. And then we'll jump over to a Windows 8 system as an end user and we'll see how these already deployed default apps can be helpful to the individuals within our Exchange organization. Alright, so here is the apps part of the organization feature. And you can see here that there are 4 default apps that are installed. All of these are enabled by default and provided to everyone in the organization. So we look at this and we see that each one of these apps has a different purpose. The Unsubscribe app activates on messages from subscription email feeds and allows you to block the sender or unsubscribe from the source. Suggested Meetings shows meeting suggestions found in your email and allows you to add them to your calendar. Bing Maps, map addresses found in your email, and Action Items. Shows action item suggestions from your email. Now we look at this and we say, okay, so these are enabled by default to everyone. There has to be more than this. Well, actually we can find more apps for Outlook at the Office Store. And if we notice here, we can add additional apps from the Office Store. We can add from a URL, or we can add from a file. So there are a lot of different ways to add additional apps here. Now, how does this actually work? Well, if we jump over to one of our end users, we can see how having these apps installed can really be helpful to them because it gives them a little bit more than what Outlook comes with right out of the box. So let's jump over to one of our end users and we'll take a look at how Bing Maps can be helpful, just as an example of what one of these apps can do for us. Alright, and so here we are logged in to our system here, our Windows 8 system, as Bethany Hayes, and we sent Bethany an invitation from my TrainSignal account, and you can see here the invitation includes an address. So notice, because Bing Maps is already installed here, and it notices that there is an address listed, Bing Maps comes up over here. So if we open this up, actually let's open up the message itself, just so we can see a bigger version of this, and we select the down arrow and we see it has 2 different addresses. We'll just pick one and you can see it brings us to Bing Maps. We can get directions, we can view a larger map. So this is really a great extra feature. It's not built into Outlook, but because we have that app enabled for our users, we have the ability, when an address is there, to actually see it in Bing Maps. You can see how with just this one app, this could be very helpful for our Outlook users. So what other apps might be helpful to us? Well, the end user might go and click File and select Manage Apps and then look for additional apps that they might want to install personally. Or as an administrator, we may install additional apps for them through the Apps part of the organization feature. So you can see how these extra little apps can really help to benefit your Outlook users, depending on what they want to do and whether or not there's an app for that. Now the next thing we want to talk about is address lists. Before we do that, let's just take a quick look at the address book, because you can see when we send an email, we have the global address list, which includes all of the different persons and all of the different objects in Active Directory within our organization. But obviously, if the organization was pretty big, this global address list might be a little bit overbearing. You can see that we have smaller lists here. We have all contacts, all groups, all rooms, all users, and public folders. So these are built-in address lists. However, we can create additional ones to help our end users to find the individuals they need faster based upon department or based upon location and so forth. So let's talk a little bit more about these address lists. Address lists are collections of recipients. So when you have an organization, you start off with a few default address lists, and the real big address list that everyone typically uses is the Global Address List, or GAL. And this has all recipients and all Active Directory objects for your Exchange organization. But sometimes, as your organization grows, this is too big to be practical. So if you have thousands of individuals in an organization, you may not want to go searching through the global address list to find them. And so a lot of times what happens is you create smaller departmental or regional address lists. Now, it's important to note that you don't want to create too many of these. The goal is to make it easier on your end users to find others without having to use the global address list. So if you have too many address lists, that makes it just as frustrating. In addition to address lists, there is another feature in Exchange called the Address Book Policy. So address book policies, these assist with global address list segmentation, also known as GAL segregation. So at times you may need to segregate the global address list for your organization. And when might you do that? Well, let's say you have two separate companies, but you only have one Exchange organization. So in that case, you may want to split these companies into two pieces by utilizing two different global address lists. So the way you do this is you establish an address book policy, and when you create the address book policy, you assign a global address list, you assign an offline address book, a room list, and one or more address lists. So you assign all of this to the policy, and then you can assign that policy to your end users, to your mailboxes. Now, the negative here is that you cannot create an address book policy through the Exchange Admin Center. So to create this, you have to utilize the Exchange Management Shell, use the new -address book policy commandlet, and then once you have the new address book policy, then you can apply it using the Exchange Admin Center through mailbox recipients, or you can still use the Exchange Management Shell. So for our Spytech Prime organization, we're going to download and configure the LinkedIn app for Outlook. This is a free app for Outlook 2013 and Outlook Web App 2013. And then we're going to create 3 address lists: London, Miami, and Trinidad. Alright, so let's get this done. Okay, so for starters, let's click the plus sign here and choose Add from the Office Store. It brings us to another page where we can look through all of the different apps that are available. We can see what they might cost. In this case, many of these are for free. And here we see a LinkedIn app for Outlook, and it's for Outlook 2013 and Outlook Web App. So it's free. Let's add that in. So it gives us at a glance information what this app is going to be about. We can read more about it. We can read the comments of others as far as their ratings, and we can click Add when we're ready. So it says, please confirm you want to install this app. We click Yes. So as you can see, the app has been added in. If we go to the Apps section here, we can see that we now have a LinkedIn app. And what's interesting is that it is organization enabled, it is provided to everyone, but it is not enabled by default. So it is not user default enabled. So in this case, the users will have to enable them themselves, or we can make changes to any of these things through the Exchange Management Shell. So if you want to learn more about doing that, if you click the little question mark up here at the top right, notice it brings us to a list of commandlets. And so we utilize this through the Exchange Management Shell to enable apps, to change their settings, and so forth. Here you can see it gives a variety of different examples on how we can change the way this app will work for our end users. Let's jump over to our end user Bethany Hayes, and let's see how this app will work for her. Alright, and so here we are back in our Outlook client, and you can see here we have an email that doesn't have any specific LinkedIn contact information, but when you have the LinkedIn app installed, it will reach out to LinkedIn for any information about the person who sent the email. And so in my case, you're not going to see much because I don't really have much when it comes to LinkedIn. But nevertheless, the nice thing about the app is that it will automatically reach out and try to find information about me through LinkedIn. But as you can see, it's not going to do anything because the app is not enabled. So we saw that the app is approved by the administrator for the organization for everyone. But at this point, Bethany Hayes needs to jump in there, click File, and then down here at the bottom, Manage Apps, log in, and here we can see the default apps that are installed and enabled. But in this case, we have to select Enable to enable this LinkedIn app. And then once that's all set, we can close out of here, close Outlook, restart Outlook, and now notice, now there's a little app link here that we can select. It found 2 contacts in the message. Obviously, this is a fictitious user, and my account isn't really filled with any information, so it finds us, but it doesn't show us anything. But we appreciate this app, that it's there, that it can help us out when it comes to finding out more information about persons that email us. And you can see here that multiple apps can work together. So you can have the Bing Maps app as well as the LinkedIn app, and then any other additional apps that are installed along the line here. Okay, so now let's jump back over to the Exchange server and let's configure some of those address lists that were part of our tasks for our scenario with SpyTech Prime. And so the second part of our scenario here, the tasks that we've been assigned, include creating 3 new address lists. So we are looking at address lists. We can see the default ones that are listed here. We can see that some of these are not up to date, but we can click the Update button to update these ones. And if we want to add additional address lists, we can click the plus sign here. And so we have 3 that we're going to add. The first is London, and we're going to leave it at the root here. It's not going to be a sub-address list. We'll leave it right up at the top. We can change the type of recipients to include. We'll leave all recipient types, but you can narrow it down by selecting only the following recipient types and then choosing the ones that you want. And here we can create a rule. So we click Add a Rule, and then we can choose what we're looking to create the rule over. In this case, we're not going to segment it by department. We're going to actually use location, which we don't see here. So we could use a custom attribute. In this case, we'll use state or province just to make it easier. And we're going to start with London. We hit the plus sign and then OK. Now, with all of our recipients, we have not utilized state or province to indicate the location of these different users. Basically, they're users in a lab environment, so there's no point in doing that. But we did add one of these recipient mailboxes to London under the state and province settings. So when we click Preview Recipients, notice that individual comes up. So you'll be able to preview the different recipients that will be in that address list. So that's kind of nice. So we do that, and we click Save. We say OK, and we'll click Update. And now we have our new address list. Let's create the other 2. And yes, we know that Trinidad and London are not states or provinces, but they are locations, so this is going to work for us for now. Alright, so we created the 3 different address lists. Let's jump over to our end user and let's see how this now changes the game in terms of our global address list. But you can visualize and see how on a larger scale this can be very helpful to make it easier for end users to find persons that they want to send an email to. Alright, so now that we have those 3 new address lists, if we go to the address book, here we can see our global address list and we can see all of the persons in the company. But let's say we just wanted to look for people that were located in London. Now we have those additional address lists here. We click London and there's James Reed. We go back to the global address list and we can find James. He's there. But isn't it much easier to just find James through the London address list? So again, with only 25 users, with only 25 recipients, mailboxes, it's really not necessary to utilize these different address books. We might feel that it's good to organize individuals by department or location, but the best practice and goal is to create address lists that make sense when it comes to assisting end users to search for and email persons within the organization. That's the whole goal. So you don't want to overdo the creation of address lists. So in this lesson we talked about a lot of different things. We talked about federation and organization relationships and sharing policies. Then we talked about apps, and then we finished things up with address lists and address book policies. All of that can be found under the Organization feature in the Exchange Admin Center. So we hope you found this informative. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next lesson.